What are the things that you notice, perhaps three things you notice people very commonly get wrong when you speak with them?
Yeah. That you need a lot of carbohydrate in your diet if you're going to be active and exercising. That's not correct. That to get fat, you should eat fat, and to lose fat, you should not eat fat, which is kind of the same thing in a lot of ways, but it's specific to the fat thing. And that staying in zone 2, the aerobic zone, is optimal for fat burning because that's your fat burning zone. Utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. I suppose that's 3. There you go.
Very good. I'll add a question on just to top it up a little bit. So I've got a question about steady state cardio. I mean, I don't prescribe it to any clients. You don't either, to my understanding. What is the mechanism at play that makes it so deleterious to health outcomes?
Right. There are several. Number 1, a person who exercises for a good number of hours a week in this steady state, so-called aerobic, so-called zone 2, so-called fat-burning training zone, will almost invariably experience quite a significant increase in their hunger signaling, disproportionate to how much mass they have actually oxidized and excreted from their body as part of their exercise. What I'm saying is a person will tend, left to their own devices, to overeat if they do a lot of that kind of exercise. The other problem is, or another problem is, that a person who exercises in that manner, all else being equal, will tend to strip muscle mass off their body. Muscle fibers are trainable. They're plastic in terms of their morphology, the way they're made up physically, as well as chemically, biologically, all of that. All muscle fibers exist on a continuum. Most people that know anything about muscle fibers, or think they do, did a course in exercise physiology at some time when they were taught there are 3 different muscle fiber types: type 1, type 2A, and type 2B, sometimes called 2X. And that muscle fibers are one of those 3, and that's how it is. No, muscle fibers exist on a continuum between the so-called type 1 and so-called type 2B or 2X variety, and they exist in a number of different fiber diameters with different sizes of, or expressions of, the protein chains, the actin and myosin, heavy chain, light chain, all of that. Their strength, their speed of contraction, their propensity to be glycolytic versus oxidative, although it's always some of both in every fiber. Any fiber between type 1 and type 2B or 2X will exist on somewhere on that continuum genetically, naturally, and that fiber can be encouraged to become more glycolytic, bigger, stronger, wider diameter. That's what hypertrophy training is. Or that muscle fiber can be convinced to get smaller, thinner, lighter chain, more oxidative, more aerobic. That's what aerobic training is. So if you do a lot of aerobic training, your muscle diameter will shrink. That means your resting basal metabolic rate will go down, as well as your hunger signal being inappropriately increased. Now you're in real trouble. You'll do more and more and more and more aerobic work because it will not work. Generally, you won't strip fat off at all. Maybe you'll even get fatter because of the change in your hunger and your basal metabolic rate. And you'll do it for years and years and years, even though it's not working, because you're just not working hard enough, long enough is what I should say. You're not doing enough of it, so even more is the answer. Then what happens is you get hypertrophy of your heart muscle over years, which will subject you in later years to an increased likelihood actually of cardiac issues above someone that didn't do all of that training when they were younger. So that's not a good thing. And then add to that when you finally stop doing all that training and go give up and say, oh, I'm just a fat bastard, that's the way it is, it's my genes, which it never was, actually. But now I don't need to pull anymore, and I don't need to look fit, and I give up, basically. Wave a white flag, I'm a fat bastard. Now you're at risk of all the things that you're more likely to suffer as a fat bastard, including everything connected to an inflamed state of being, including type 2 diabetes, tending towards type 1 diabetes, obesiogenesis, many forms of cancer. Oh yes, heart disease, all the big killers, basically. Stay the hell out of that zone 2 training. There's no place for it unless you are an athlete who is involved in a sport that requires that, in which case, what I would suggest to you personally is rethink your sporting involvement. It's not fit for a human being to do that.
Good advice. Yeah. Guess the same kind of standard falls true for like very large bodybuilders that are pumping lots of blood around the body,
yep,
more so than they'd be not meant to. So would it be fair to say that it's almost like you have a limited amount of heartbeats you can have of your lifetime, and accelerating that could be a
yep.
an